Hi guys, how are you doing? This is from techcentury and welcome to my very personal review of the Apple iPad Air. So to start off, honestly, this morning I wasn't quite sure if I would do an iPad Air review at all, because let's face it, there are already a lot of great reviews here on YouTube, for example from Soldier Knows Best, of people who just go through all the specs, show you what this means in real world, and then give you their verdict. Now, unfortunately, I feel like this isn't what represents at least my experience personally. So yes, this is a very personal review, and this definitely doesn't have to represent your experience with an iPad Air or the experience from somebody else. So I just want to make a quick disclaimer about that. Now, to first just cover off all the tech specs, yes, we'll find an A7 processor that, especially in benchmarks, kills every other iPad that we had before. Yes, the iPad Air is thinner, lighter and has smaller bezels, which makes it a great feel in the hand and is a huge improvement over previous generations. And yes, overall also iOS 7 is a new coat of paint that definitely looks nice, has some really needed and necessary functions that we didn't have before, like Control Center. But that's basically all I want to talk about, kind of about the hardware and also about the software, because just the core experience of having an iPad and using an iPad for me hasn't changed ever since the first generation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I first picked up the iPad 1, then I picked up the iPad 2, the iPad 3, the iPad 4, and now the iPad Air. But what's the experience that I always have with an iPad? Well, first, the iPad is announced. And I'm very excited because it just looks great. It's a new piece of technology. I just want to have it, especially if you just look at the ads. And then it's released and you have the big hype that Apple always makes about their products, and you want it even more. So it even ended up standing in the line, not only for the iPad Air, but also for the second generation of the iPad. And then I have the iPad and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Look at the apps, they are great. And this, also the apps, are, at least for me, what's standing out the most, especially compared to the competition. If you would ask me to just point out one single main and the most important feature of the iPad Air, it's not the thinner dimension, it's not the weight, it's not even the A7 processor, it's just the apps, because the quality and quantity of apps that you'll find on an iPad doesn't compare to any other platform. On Android you can find that. Yes, on a phone it's a great solution, but on a tablet it isn't, at least yet. And so not even the iPad 4 or now the iPad Air was able to change my core experience with the iPad. Now, I have to say I now own the iPad Air for a little bit over 1 week. And to be honest, I probably only used it maybe like every day, 10 till 30 minutes. And that's just overall how my tablet experience overall is, not only with the iPad Air, but with all the previous generations. Yes, it's nice to have. When you first pick it up, it's so amazing. Look at these new features, and you dig into the App Store and it's all great. And then it's over, for me at least. And so it's just that I'm not a big iPad or just a big tablet user. I just don't really have, or I just don't really see a point in using a tablet when I have a 5-inch phone these days that basically has all the same apps that I would also use on the iPad. Yes, some things on a bigger screen are a better experience, no doubt about that. It's definitely better to just browse the internet on a 9.7-inch device than just doing the same on your smartphone. But then again, the smartphone I always have with me. The smartphone I'll just put next to me on the couch. With the iPad I just don't really do that. So especially at home I only have one actual use case where I could use the iPad and where I really enjoy that. And that's basically just watching, for example, TV like Champions League, or also just YouTube videos, or listen to podcasts, and basically just use like a web radio or like a portable TV. And that's the only use case where I really use the iPad and where I really enjoy it. And yes, this is my experience. Your experience might be completely different. And I also have to admit that my experience was slightly different. For example, when I had the last generation iPad 4 with actually built-in 4G, because then it kind of also served as a replacement for my laptop on the go, because I just had internet everywhere. But now it's just, it doesn't really do anything that my smartphone can't do. There's no real multitasking, doing two things at once. And overall, it isn't as powerful, for example, as my laptop in terms of multitasking. And if I have to choose, well, first, either I just use my smartphone, where I can basically do everything that I can do with my iPad, or then again, if I really want to do more, I just go to my laptop or to my iMac in the back And so to sum it up, for me basically, an iPad is always nice to have. The first few weeks are always great and I really enjoy the experience, but after a couple of months it just wears off. I'm never gonna use it, and so I'll just end up selling it. So that's basically my whole story with the iPad. Yes, Apple did a fantastic job in terms of hardware. The cameras are decent for those who want to take pictures. If you just want to scan a document, for example, it's perfect. The performance overall, thanks to the processor, is very fast. Unfortunately, iOS 7 is still at the beginning, so you definitely see dropped frames even with that hardware. And just overall, the weight and size are great, but it's also something that you get used to very soon, and you just tend to forget how heavy the previous generations was. So in the end, the just user experience won't change. So you basically just have to ask yourself, are you an iPad person? And if you can answer that question with a yes, because you've owned a previous generation like an iPad 2 or 3 before, and because you're using it every day, multiple hours, then yes, it's certainly worth upgrading to the iPad Air. But if you're just somebody like me who definitely always wants to have the iPad, but who always ends up not really using it, then honestly, the iPad Air is just a waste of money because it won't change your experience. It's the same experience, only in a nicer package. And if this is worth paying $500 for it, I honestly doubt. So in the end, while I really enjoy the iPad Air, while it's a great piece of hardware, I'll be returning it to the Apple Store this week. And this also wraps up my review. So I hope that you kind of enjoyed this approach. I know it's unusual, but still I just wanted to share my experience with the iPad, because specs and hardware isn't the whole story, at least not for me. So let me know what you think about the iPad Air and just an iPad in general. Are you an iPad person? Thank you very much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, as well as also like the video. I also have some new channels starting. So for example, techcentury vlogs. I'll leave a link down below where I'll just have quick videos just rambling around random stuff. Also techcentury Germany, where I'll publish some German videos, which will take off especially next year. I'll also leave the link below in the description. And I'm just eager to hear what you have to say about the iPad Air and just iPads in general. So thanks again, and I really hope to see you in my next video. See you next time.